Hello learners, welcome to the MOOC course on Digital Humanities Theory and Practice. Now I welcome you all to a new lecture that is on the open access resources. Now we now move on to the fourth topic of this unit, that is open access resources. As we recall the previous session in which we covered how to search effectively and how to navigate academic databases and how digital scholarship actually work in practice. Today's topic connects directly to all of that. Once scholarship is produced, how does it actually circulate? And who gets access to it? Open access is one of the most significant shifts in the academic publishing in the last few decades. And understanding it will change how you find, use, and eventually share your own research. Now, here's the roadmap for today. We will begin by defining open access precisely. Then look at what made it possible as a concept and movement. We will examine the serial crisis that created the urgency for it and engaged with the ethical argument through Wilinski's access principle. We'll then break down the varieties of open access, gold and green, gratis and liberal, understanding Creative Commons licensing, and look at how institutions have formalized open access through policies and mandates. We'll close with key resources and application directly relevant to your work in digital humanities. Now let's start with the precise definition, because open access is frequently misunderstood. According to Suber, open access literature is digital, online, free of charge, and free of most copyright and licensing restrictions. Notice the two distinct types of barriers it removes: price barrier, the subscription fee, and the paywall that stop you from reading an article, and permission barriers, the copyright restrictions that stop you from redistributing, translating, or text mining a work even after you have accessed it. The distinction between removing only price barriers, which gives you the gratis open access, and removing both price and permission barriers, which gives you liberal or LIBOR open access. Open access is one of the most important conceptual tool in this lecture. Also notice that open access is not what open access is not, and I want you to hold on these because they will come up as misconceptions throughout your career. Open access is not about bypassing peer review, it is not about violating copyrights, and it is not attempting to destroy publishing. It is simply about making research more widely available. Now this slide, it answers a question a student often asks: why would an author give away their work for free? The answer is that for most academic authors, giving it away was already the norm centuries before the internet. Scholarly journals have never paid authors for research articles, not since the very first one launched in 1665. So when scholars consent to open access, they are not making a sacrifice they weren't already making. Their rewards were salaries, promotion, tenures, and citation, not royalties. This is what makes scholars almost uniquely positioned in the publishing world to take full advantage of open access. Musicians and novelists depend on royalties and cannot easily do this, but scholars do not. And there is a compelling self-interest argument too. Research has consistently shown open access articles are cited more often than the non-open articles, even when published in the very same journal issue. So open access is not a sacrifice for scholars who write for impact. It actively advances their own career interest by broadening their audience. Now I want you to understand exactly why open access became a movement, not just a nice idea. There is a genuine documented crisis in the circulation of academic knowledge. Subscription prices have risen faster than the inflation for decades, at roughly twice the rate of healthcare costs, which most people already consider the outrageously expensive. And the consequences are stark. Walensky opened his book with the story of a Kenya Medical Research Institution in Nairobi, which by the early 2000s could only subscribe to 5 medical journals, none of them covering the institute's principal research interest of tropical diseases. A leading medical research center in East Africa was conducting research in a near vacuum of the relevant literature. But this is not only a developing world problem. Super documented that Harvard itself, which subscribed to more journals than any other library in North America, has been forced into serious cancellation efforts because of the cumulative price increases. When Harvard can't afford to keep up, the scale of crisis becomes undeniable. Now, Walensky's access principle is the moral and the intellectual core of why open access matters beyond the practical matter of saving library money. The argument is simple but profound. If you believe research has value, you are already committed to making it as widely available as possible. And the publicly funded nature of most academic research strengthens this if taxpayers fund the research through the government grants, through the public universities that pay academic salaries, and what justifies handing the results of that publicly funded work over to commercial publishers who then charge those same taxpayers to access it. Now, there is also a research impact argument worth taking seriously of your own future careers. Walensky cites study after study showing that the open access articles generate more citations in some discipline up to 4 or 5 times as many. This is not just a benefit for the world, it is a benefit for you personally as a researcher building a scholarly reputation. And Walensky also makes a wider public case, evidence-based policy making, journalism, public health communication, all of these depend on public access to the research they're supposed to build on. Open access is not just a publishing reform, it is a democratic question about who gets to participate in the knowledge economy. Now, the gold-green distinction is one of the most practically useful things you'll take from this lecture because it changes how you think about open access as a researcher. Now, let's just see what gold open access. Open access delivered by journals. The journal itself provides immediate open access to all its content. Green open access is simply open access delivered by repositories. The authors deposit their work in an open access repository, institutional or sometimes subject based, even if the journal itself remains subscription based. Right? So, a very common misconception is that the open access means finding and publishing in a fully open access journal. But green open access means you can publish in a best tool access journal in your field and then deposit your own version in an open repository, and both can happen simultaneously. Most tool access publishers already permit this. The green and gold are complementary, not competing. Most tool access journals already permit the author-initiated green open access, making it possible to publish in a prestigious journal and still making the work of open access. Right? So Sober calls this as one of the best kept secrets of the scholarly publishing, which is an overwhelming majority of subscription-based journals already giving the blanket permission for green self-archiving. But most researchers simply don't know it. So before you conclude that you must choose between publishing in a prestigious journal or making your work open access, check the policy. The chance is high that you don't have to choose at all. The low spontaneous deposit rate of around 15% is almost entirely explained not by opposition to open access, but by unfamiliarity with the option. So yes, as I had discussed, that the spontaneous deposit rate for green open access without an institutional policy is around 15%. With a mandate, institution can push this towards 100%. Now, this slide is particularly important for you as a digital humanity researchers because the gratis or the LIBOR distinction is the one that directly affects what you can do with the material you find. Gratis open access means you can read it for free, but you still can't do things like distribute copies to a class, create a derivative work, translate it, or run through the text mining software without seeking permission first. So yes, as I discussed, that gratis open access is free to read, but standard copyright applies. Users cannot exceed fair use without seeking permission, whereas on the LIBOR open access, which is free to read and free of at least some permission barriers, user may redistribute, translate, text mine, or reuse in a way that exceeded fair use. So we were discussing about the gratis open access. Yes, so LIBOR open access removes at least some of those restrictions through open license. Think about what means for your research if you want to build a corpus of text for a computation analysis. You need LIBOR open access, not just gratis. This is why Creative Commons license matters so much in digital humanities work specifically. CC BY is most permissive and widely recommended, and it allows any use as long as you attribute the original author. CC BY and NC blocks commercial use. CC BY ND blocks the derivative work. The key practical point here is when you find the open access article, always check what license it carries, because free to read and free to use in your research project are not the same thing. Alright, so next is open access policies, mandates, and the institutional framework. Now, this slide addresses a question you might have. If open access is so obviously beneficial, why does it need to be mandated at all? Now, the answer Subha gives is not what that scholar opposite. In fact, surveys consistently show that overwhelming majority of researchers would willingly comply with an open access mandate. The problem is inertia and the unfamiliarity when depositing is optional. Only about 15% of the eligible authors do it, not because they object, but because they are busy and it's not their default habit. Policies shift the default. And the word mandate is somewhat misleading. Subha himself admits this. Howard Framer's open access policy is better understood as a shift in the default. Faculty voted unanimously to give the university permission to make their future open access, with the option to opt out for any individual publication. That waiver rate is under 5%, meaning more than 95% of the work covered by the policy becomes open access. When institutional policy makes the right choice, the easy default, it works. And for you personally, if you receive funding from NIH or Wellcome Trust, open access deposit is already a condition of your grant. So understanding these policies practically important for your own future research career. Now let us make this concrete by looking at the actual resources available to you. The DOAJ, which is simply the Directory of Open Access Journal, is your best starting point for finding peer-reviewed open access journal in any field. It lists only the journals that meet quality standards. So it's a reliable guide rather than just any list of free-to-read content. Then PubMed Central is a product of NIH mandate, showing how funder policy can create a large searchable corpus of openly available research at scale. Then we have Oyster. Oyster and Core both allow you to search across thousands of open access repositories simultaneously, surfacing material that a standard search engine would never find. Then we have PLOS, Public Library of Sciences. Public Library of Sciences. Now, PLOS Biology's launch in 2003 was a watershed moment. It demonstrated that an open access journal could compete directly with the most prestigious subscribed journal in biology, winning top paper awards from Nature and Sciences, and permanently changed the conversation about whether open access could be high quality. And for your specific field, Digital Humanities Quarterly is a quality peer-reviewed open access journal, meaning you can read, cite and build on its content freely, which is exactly the kind of content you should be prioritizing to this course. Now, open access in the humanities and the developing world. Open access is not limited to the sciences. It extends to the arts, humanities, social science, though it has moved slower in this field. Now, I want you to connect this material to your own field and context specifically. Open access in the humanities matter for reasons slightly different from those of the sciences. In STEM field, the urgency is often framed about medical researches or technological progresses. In the humanities, the case is more about whose histories, languages, and the culture get studied and circulated internationally. If a scholar is a less well-resourced institution, if a scholar in a less well-resourced institution writes an important work on a regional language or the colonial archive, open access determine whether the work reaches the community it's about or whether it stays locked behind a paywall accessible only to the libraries that can afford the subscription that are paid. To the journals that are paid or the subscription themselves. Now, Wilinski Khemri example is a dramatic, but the same structural problem plays out at smaller scale in very under-resourced institutions worldwide. For your digital humanities projects, specifically the LIBOR open access, point connects directly to your practical research needs. If you don't want a text corpus, if you don't want to build a text corpus, run computational analysis, or create a digital edition for public use, that you need material under open license, and identifying the open access sources in not just an ethical preferences, but it's a practical requirement for what you are trying to do. So that's bring us to the end of this very short topic, very brief topic of the subunit on open access resources. Now look back over the key takeaway on this slide. They'll pull together everything from the basic definition of OA to the practical distinction between the gold and the green, gratis and the LIBOR, that will shape you find and use research material going forward. So open access literature in digital, online, free of charge and free of most copyright and licensing restrictions. Removing both removing both price and permission barriers. What makes open access possible for scholars specifically is that academic journals do not pay authors, freeing them to share their work without financial sacrifices. The civil crisis has created genuine and research access gaps, even at the wealthiest research institutions, making open access not analytic wish but a practical necessity. Yes, so two ideas I'd like you to carry with you specifically. First, Wilinski access principle. The idea that believing in the value of research already commits you to sharing as widely as possible. And second is the practical point that most toll access journals are already, they are permitted green self-archiving, meaning you are rarely have to choose between publishing and the best journal in your field and making your work open access. In our next and the final session of this unit, we will turn to the citation tools and the references, looking at how to manage, organize, and collectively or correctly cite the sources you've been learning to find across the entire unit. So we come to an end of this short lecture, which was on the open access. So I shall see you in the next lecture, which is on citation tools and references. Till then, go through the lecture again. I'll meet you in the next class. Thank you so much. Bye bye.